Hello and welcome back to Doctor Who, The Cancelled Years. In this video, we'll be covering Season 47 of Doctor Who, so let's get started. Season 47 would have been the first season for Peter Capaldi as the Doctor, the last season for Freema Agyeman as Ashley Tannen, the first full season for Tom Ellis as Richard McIntyre, and the second season for Paul Cornell as showrunner. This season would have marked the beginning for the 13th Doctor, Peter Capaldi. Capaldi would have been the second actor in the show who had previously played another character in the show to then go on to become the Doctor. In Capaldi's case, he had played Colleen's guard in 1993's The Gallifreyan election, as well as Cecilius in 2006's The Fires of Pompeii. The season also saw the proper introduction to Tom Ellis as Richard McIntyre, who debuted in the final 2 episodes of Season 46. A big change to this season was the episode count. Now there would be 12 episodes instead of 10. However, instead of airing non-stop for 12 weeks straight, the BBC decided to split the season into 2, with episodes 1 to 6 airing in late 2010 and episodes 7 to 12 airing in early 2011. As well as this, it was decided to give Doctor Who a Christmas special, which would air between episodes 6 and 7, essentially giving the season 13 episodes. Another change to the show was the title sequence. These would mostly be the same as the Carlisle Season 46 ones, however the colour scheme was changed to green, and Carlisle's credit was replaced with Capaldi's. And finally, an update on the production team. Beth Willis would have joined on as an executive producer. Along with this came a 3rd and 4th producer to the show, these being Marcus Wilson and Denise Paul. And now, let's get to the episodes. The first episode would have been Epsilon, written by Paul Cornell. The story sees the TARDIS crash landing on a multi-race colony world, where Ashley and Richard try and help the Doctor through post-regeneration. Due to the effects of the Eye of Omega, the regeneration has gone haywire. The Doctor is taken to a hospital that has something similar to a Zero Room, which will help the Doctor recover. As the Doctor recovers, Ashley and Richard find themselves wrapped up in a conspiracy from within the hospital, as patients are vanishing into thin air. It turns out there is an entity named Epsilon living underneath the hospital. Epsilon calls out to lost people and offers them immortality in exchange for becoming a part of them, and while the people do become immortal, they're trapped within Epsilon itself in never-ending pain. Eventually, Epsilon is defeated when the Doctor eventually recovers and destroys its life crystal, which kills Epsilon and lets the souls within the entity rest at last. We end the episode in the TARDIS, just after the Doctor has picked out his new outfit. We see Ashley and Richard checking in with the new Doctor and asking how he is coping. He reveals that he is near the end of his life. He explains the 13 lives limit and says that he has no more regenerations. The Doctor then tells Richard that he'll try and get him home, before Richard stops him and asks if he can stay a bit longer and explore the universe with him. The Doctor says he doesn't see why not, and so he sets the TARDIS to dematerialise. The second episode would have been Sympathy for the Daleks, written by Joseph Lidster. This story would have been about a group of humanoids trying to free a group of Daleks from suspension, as they have sympathy for the Daleks. Whilst they believe that the Daleks have done bad things, this was due to the Time Lords when they tried to erase them from history. They also blame the Time Lords for the destruction of their ancestors' home during the Eternity War. The Doctor tries to warn the humanoids, however they don't believe him, as they don't know he is a Time Lord, and that he wouldn't know what the war was like. However, when the Doctor reveals his identity, the humanoids try and kill the Doctor, as they believe him to be the greatest war criminal ever. They end up unfreezing 2 Daleks and try getting them to kill the Doctor. And whilst the Daleks do try and kill the Doctor, they also try killing the humanoids. Eventually, the Doctor and his companions discover that all of the humanoids are dead, which angers the Doctor. Eventually, the 2 Daleks are destroyed using some explosives that the humanoids had, and the rest of the Daleks are stopped when the Doctor breaks the controls that releases the Daleks and blows up the cave they're stored in, leaving them imprisoned under mountains of rock forever. The 3rd episode would have been the Lincoln Assassination, written by John Dorney. This would have been a pure historical and would have covered the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. The TARDIS arrives in Washington on the 15th of April 1865. After realising where and when he is, the Doctor wishes to leave as he doesn't wish to get involved in such an important part of history. However, after Richard realises where he is and what happens today, he goes AWOL, as he believes that if he can stop the assassination, the world might be a better place. The story sees the Doctor and Ashley being forced to try and stop Richard from taking down John Wilkes Booth, which annoys Ashley as she feels bad for what she has to do. However, the Doctor has to remind about cause and effect, and how you can't change history, even if it's for the better. Eventually, the Doctor is able to stop Richard and he's forced to let the assassination happen. And while the Doctor says he understands why Richard would want to change the outcome, he can't allow it to happen, as it's against the rules. The 4th episode would have been The House of Nothing, written by Neil Gaiman. This would have been a story from our own universe, the Doctor's wife. However, because of the age difference between Capaldi and Surin Jones, Idris would instead be played by Miranda Richardson. Other than that though, it would have been pretty much the same story. The 5th episode would have been The Invasion of Sontar, written by Alan Barnes. The story sees the Doctor and companions arriving on a planet, which the Doctor soon discovers to be Sontar, as they're captured by a group of alien Sontarans, which we learn are just called Sonts. They haven't developed into the war-heavy race yet, however the Doctor notices that the cloning has already begun, which is wrong, as the cloning technology never existed until after the War of the Rutans began. The Doctor and companions are arrested, as they're believed to be alien spies from another world, and they're to be executed at dawn. However, a crisis on Sontar soon occurs, as one of Sontar's major cities is attacked. We find out the Rutans were responsible for the attack, and they declare war on Sontar for not helping them out when they came under attack from another alien race. With the Sonts too distracted by the oncoming attack, the Doctor and companions manage to break free from captivity. Ashley and Richard wish to return to the TARDIS, however the Doctor wants to investigate, as he needs to find out why the cloning has started so early. He eventually finds an underground chamber where he finds dozens of advanced cloning machines, fully primed. The Doctor becomes confused as he doesn't understand how or why this technology is here, as the cloning machines this advanced don't come until thousands of years later. And as the Doctor begins to question how it came here, we hear a voice behind him say, "That would be my doing, Doctor." The trio turn around and we see the Master, with a group of Sonts at her side. And the story ends on that cliffhanger. The 6th episode would have been The First Sontarans, written by Alan Barnes. The story picks up where the previous one left off, with the Doctor coming face to face with the Master. The Doctor asks how she escaped Earth with no TARDIS, and she reveals a Vortex manipulator, saying that she required it with help from an old friend of the Doctor's. The Doctor asks who this friend is, but the Master refuses to say, saying that he'll find out when the time is right. The Doctor asks what her plan is, and the Master reveals that she plans to rewrite the Sontaran history in her favour, so that the Rutans are wiped out early on, and the Sontarans become her own army. And now the Doctor knows her plan, he must die, so he orders the Sonts to kill them. However, the trio are able to escape the gunfire when the building comes under attack from the Rutans. We then see the Doctor companions travelling to Route F3, where they work with the Rutan army to defeat the Sonts, as history recalls that the Sonts lost the first battle. And with help from the Rutan military, they're able to destroy the underground chamber, including all the cloning machines. The trio then head back to Sontar, where they're able to turn the Sonts against the Master when they trick them into believing she was a double agent for the Rutans. However, before the Sonts can execute her, she teleports away with her Vortex manipulator. and with the Sons defeated and history back on course, the Doctor companions depart in the TARDIS. So that was part 1 of season 47. Now for the Christmas special. The 25th of December, written by Paul Cornell. The story sees the Doctor and companions arriving on an Earth space cruiser, where we learn that this is a Christmas cruise, as it's the 25th of December on Earth. At first, the Doctor companions decide to enjoy the cruise as a holiday. However, disaster soon strikes, as the ship begins to break apart. The TARDIS's HAD systems activate, thus dematerializing the TARDIS without the Doctor inside. And eventually, the ship crashes into Jupiter, creating a massive explosion. And then all of a sudden, everything is fine. The Doctor companions are back on the ship. Time appears to have rewound. The Doctor companions remember crashing, yet no one else does. And furthermore, the TARDIS is gone. And then the ship crashes again, and time rewinds again, and so on, and so on. The story sees the Doctor trying to figure out what is causing this time loop, as well as why only he and his companions are affected, and how to get out of it. We eventually discover that there is a rogue passenger on the ship named Nakrod. We learn that Nakrod's employer hired him to trap the Doctor in a loop that he can never escape from. Eventually, however, Nakrod is defeated when he is pushed into the ship's core during a fight between him and Richard, and the Doctor is successfully able to stop the ship from crashing. He then locates the TARDIS, which he discovers to be on Jupiter, so the trio escape in an escape pod, where they crash land on Jupiter and return to the TARDIS. And now, back to the main season for part 2 of season 47. The 7th episode would have been The God Complex, written by Toby Whithouse. This would have been pretty much the same story from our own universe. The only real difference would be what the Doctor saw in his room, where instead of seeing a bright light, he instead sees the shadow of a person. And another difference would be the fact that the companions stay on with the Doctor at the end of the episode instead of leaving. Other than that though, would have been pretty much the same story. The 8th episode would have been The Mind's Eye, written by Nicholas Briggs. The story focuses on a man named Thomas. We see that life hasn't been fair to Thomas, as he keeps losing everything, from his father passing away to his girlfriend dumping him. He decides to create a comic strip based off how he sees the world, with all of his characters representing someone in his life, but with all of their worst aspects. However, without him realising, an alien parasite has connected itself to Thomas. We see that the parasite feeds off despair and is using Thomas's visions on how he sees everyone to turn those thoughts into real people, which replaces their actual counterparts and traps them in another universe. The story sees the Doctor companions trying to figure out how the people are being replaced and what is causing this. They eventually work out what is going on and realise that the only way to defeat the parasite is if Thomas has no despair. So the trio work with Thomas's remaining friends and family to make Thomas feel important and special, which kills the parasite along with its creations and returns all of the normal people back to our own universe. The 9th episode would have been The Cannibalists, written by Jonathan Morris. The story sees the Doctor companions arriving on a space station where they meet a group of robots named the Assemblers. We find that the robots are waiting for the day that the humans arrive, and that they live in fear of another group of robots who live in the lower levels named the Cannibalists, who disassemble other robots for parts to survive. We see the Doctor companions working with the Assemblers and a robot named Servo to find a reset switch so that the Cannibalists can be defeated. We learn a bit about the robot Servo and the fact that he has an interest in poetry. Partway through the story, we're introduced to the control server named Minerva. The Doctor uses Minerva to rescue Ashley and make sure that Servo is not harmed. However, the leader of the Cannibalists, named Titus, takes control of Minerva after he synthesizes the Doctor's voice and makes her obey him instead. Eventually, the Doctor discovers that Minerva is the reset switch, and we discover that there have actually been other Assemblers and Cannibalists in the city before the robots we knew in this story, as Minerva shows the robots repeating the same cycle throughout history. Servo wishes to reset everything again, however the Doctor tries to stop him, as he realises that Servo is a unique robot and greater than anything that had become before him and calls him a miracle of evolution, for developing the drive and capacity to create poetry. However, Zero synthesizes the Doctor's voice and tells Minerva to reset the station to factory settings. When the reboot is finished, we discover that Zero is still here. As it turns out, Minerva was still following the orders that prevented her from wiping him. And with Zero safe, the Doctor encourages him to help the assemblers make the right decisions this time round and break free of the cycle. The 10th episode would have been Hyde, written by Neil Cross. This would have been pretty much the story from our own universe. The only real difference would have been the inclusion of a second companion. Other than that, there would have been pretty much the same story. The 11th episode would have been Grave Robbers, written by Paul Cornell. The story sees the Doctor taking Ashley home to visit her family as she's feeling homesick. Meanwhile, the Doctor and Richard go off exploring the nearby area. Ashley dashes home to see her family, however upon entering her house, her family is surprised to see her, as it turns out Ashley's been missing for over a year. The family are angry at Ashley for abandoning them. Ashley apologizes before asking where her mother is, and we quickly realise that Ashley's mother has passed away. Meanwhile, we see the Doctor and Richard investigating a graveyard after discovering a bunch of reports of graves being dug up and the bodies buried being stolen, and another report from last week involving an old man being found murdered in the field. All of this would be interlinking with scenes with Ashley and her family, and we'd have a lot of character work and focus on her. Eventually, the Doctor discovers the murderer wandering around the graveyard at night, and he finds it to be a damaged Cyberman. Believing that there are probably more Cybermen around, the Doctor hacks and reprograms the Cyberman to return to its base of operations. The Doctor and Richard follow the Cyberman back to its spaceship, which they find to be buried deep underneath the graveyard. As the Doctor and Richard explore the cyberbase, they discover that the Cybermen are using the bodies of the dead to convert into new Cybermen. However, before they can explore the rest of the base, they're captured by a group of Cybermen, who tells the Doctor that the Controller is expecting him. The Doctor and Richard are taken to what appears to be the leader's room, where they see a man with his back to them in front of them. The Doctor is confused as to who this is. Without turning around, the man says that he's been expecting the Doctor. The Doctor pauses in fear as he recognises the voice. The man turns around and he reveals himself to be the man played by Richard E. Grant from the season 46 finale. We see faded flashbacks throughout the past 2 seasons. The first scenes of the man in the oncoming nightmare, the Master saying that she had help from an old friend in the First Sontarans, and the God Complex, where we see that the man was the one the Doctor feared the most. The Doctor asks how he can be here, and the man says that he always survives, and that he shouldn't be so confused about the whole situation. Richard asks the Doctor who this is, and the Doctor simply says, the Valeyard. The Doctor then explains who the Valeyard is to Richard, which also teaches new views about who the Valeyard is as well. He then asks the Valeyard why he's helping the Cybermen, as he'll gain nothing out of this, and the Valeyard says that he simply wants to break the Doctor by destroying his precious human race. The Valeyard goes on to say that the Doctor will help him, and that he has no choice. The Doctor refuses, while slowly backing away with Richard. The Doctor prepares to do a "when I say run, run" scene, but before he can shout run, the Valeyard electrocutes the Doctor using his cyber crown. A group of Cybermen try to stop Richard from escaping, but they're too slow. The Valeyard then orders them to find him and capture him. We end on the cliffhanger, with the Valeyard ordering the Cyber Army to begin their invasion. An army of Cybermen begin to emerge from the ship and head off in all directions to find and kill any human on sight. The Valeyard looks down at the Doctor and states, "Now it begins." And we end on that cliffhanger. The final episode would have been the Dawn of Cyberman, written by Paul Cornell. This would have been the second half of the season finale and would have been the final story for Ashley Tannen. We begin with Ashley and her family as their house is attacked by a Cyberman. However, Richard bursts in with a gun and shoots the Cyberman down. He tells Ashley to grab her family and to get them to the TARDIS. Meanwhile, we see that the Doctor has awakened in another part of the cybership. The Valiard orders the Doctor to create a cyber virus for the Cybermen. It turns out that the Cybermen have created a proto-time machine using cyber technology and some of the Valiard's own technology. They plan to go back in time and infect the human gene pools so that the human race will evolve into Cybermen. When the Cybermen and Valiants aren't looking, the Doctor meddles with the cyber time machine and rigs it to blow as soon as it's activated. Meanwhile, this is intercut with Ashley and her family in the TARDIS, as Ashley is forced to reveal everything to them and why she was missing for a year. Her father apologises to her and blames the Doctor for everything. The Doctor creates the cyber virus and is forced to board the cyber time machine along with the Valiard and Cybermen. They begin to power up the machine, however they begin to realise that something is wrong as it begins sparking. The Doctor reveals what he's done and says that the explosion should be big enough to destroy the entire ship. The Valiard orders a Cyberman to kill the Doctor, however he slips out of the way and escapes the cyber ship mere seconds before it blows up in a massive explosion. Once clear of any wreckage, the Doctor phones up UNIT and asks them to help search and clear the area of any remaining Cybermen. After this, he phones Richard to make sure everything is okay. Richard tells him that they're all in the TARDIS and that the Doctor should come back as something strange is going on with the console. The Doctor enters the TARDIS only to find the Valiard and 2 Cybermen holding the entire group hostage. It turns out that the Valiard managed to escape via a Vortex manipulator along with 2 Cybermen and a sample of the cyber virus. The Valiard orders the Doctor to take the TARDIS to prehistoric Earth or else they'll kill his friends. The Doctor silently agrees and begins working at the controls, attempting to pilot the TARDIS through time. The TARDIS lands and the Doctor says they've arrived. The Doctor opens the doors by the console and the Valiard prepares to exit the ship. Then suddenly, everything begins to be pulled out the TARDIS as the Doctor tells his friends to hold on. It turns out that the Doctor actually piloted the TARDIS to a supernova with a vacuum corridor set up to pull the Cybermen and Valiard out. The 2 Cybermen fall through while the Valiard remains hanging on to the door. The Doctor offers to help him, but the Valiard refuses and lets go. However, without anyone seeing, but the audience seeing, the Valiard teleports away the last second using his Vortex manipulator. The Doctor attempts to close the doors, but the console begins to spark. Ashley loses her grip and begins falling through the TARDIS. The Doctor grabs onto her arm and tries to pull her in. However, the console begins to spark even more and the Doctor accidentally loses his grip and Ashley is thrown out of the ship and into the supernova. And as Ashley is falling, the doors begin to close. We fade to later on as the Doctor silently pilots the TARDIS back to the modern day. We see Ashley's family in tears. They leave the TARDIS without saying a word, except for Ashley's dad, who calls the Doctor a dangerous monster and that he's no better than the Valiard. He tells the Doctor to never contact their family again before shooting an evil look at the Doctor and storming off. The Doctor tries to talk to Richard, but he refuses. After trying to apologise to Richard for what happened, Richard snaps. He tells the Doctor that he's gone too far this time. What he did was reckless and dangerous, and now Ashley is dead because of it. He grabs his things and leaves the TARDIS, telling the Doctor to stay away forever. We end the episode with the Doctor in a TARDIS, alone. He sits down on a chair and thinks to himself. He now realises what he has done was dangerous and that he needs some time alone. He gets up to the console, pulls the dematerialisation lever down, and the TARDIS begins to take off. Then we cut to black. Then we fade in the dark room. We see the Valiard lying on the floor and slowly rising to his feet. He looks around him. Nothing. Then he sees a small blue light flicker in the distance. Then more blue lights appear. And then we begin to hear the sounds of a Dalek control room. The lights move out of the shadows, which reveals a group of Daleks surrounding the Valiard. The Daleks order the Valiard to identify himself. The Valiard makes an evil smile and says, "Your saviour," before cutting to the end credits. And that concludes season 47 of Doctor Who. This was yet another successful season for the show, though it was felt that the show had reached its peak in popularity, and that there would be a slow decline until the 50th anniversary, as theories about what the 50th anniversary would include began to surface on the internet. So join me next time for season 48 of Doctor Who. Until then, thank you for watching and goodbye.